Hi, thank you for watching my Workbench build video. Here's a sketch of the bench that I did in SketchUp. You can see the dimensions I'm aiming to achieve here. Eventually, this will also end up being on wheels. I started working on this in February of 2020, before we were all sent home due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I finished the build in early April. In terms of actual hours spent, I didn't track any of this. I wasn't in a rush to finish the build, so I only worked on it when I wanted to, and when I could. I started off by preparing all the pieces I needed. I used the SketchUp model as a basis to make all the cuts I needed from the 2x4s. Here I start putting the legs together. The two 2x4s that make the legs are offset by the width of one 2x4. There's 6 legs in total. I'm only showing one. At some point during the leg builds, I switched to the Lepage adhesive instead of the wood glue. It was easier to apply and also filled the gaps of some of the curvier bits of 2x4s. This is a couple of weeks later, I think right around the time when the schools closed, around the time of the March break. I didn't realize it at the time, but I'm still wearing my pajama pants. Anyway, this is the base of the workbench. I'm using the Lepage adhesive exclusively at this point, but I'm still using drywall screws, mostly because I'm running out of construction screws. Things were getting to the point where I didn't want to go shopping for any non-essential items. And that's it for the base. It's basically a rectangle. Here I'm attaching the 4 corner legs to the base. The middle legs are there to provide support for the table saw. Here, I'm measuring where they'll go. This was to ensure that the legs were going in the spots they needed to, based off the SketchUp model I prepared earlier, and it was very close, off by a few millimeters. What you didn't see, because the camera was behind me as I was doing it, was that I marked the line where the leg would line up. Now that I have all that marked up, I can get the saw out of the way and continue putting the legs up. Here, I'm lining up the back leg, using the front leg to find its location. Now, it's a matter of finishing up the framing of the bench and installing all the bracing. I don't have all the footage of this. I'm using my phone to record these videos, and the phone stops recording after 10 minutes. Usually I remember to stop and start recording, but this can get pretty boring to watch anyway. I'll fill in any gaps that don't show up on the video. I'm adding more screws here because this is a twisty bit of 2x4. Luckily, the Lepage adhesive managed to fill in a lot of the bigger gaps here. Remember when I said I didn't have the footage? Yeah, so here we are. I missed half the build. I finished up the framing and bracing, and I added on the bench top. I also added the 4 locking casters that the bench sits on. Here, I'm measuring and cutting the section of the bench where the saw will sit. Sorry for the terrible camera work. Here's a shot of my ear. Vacuuming. I was shocked at the amount of sawdust that this generated. I'm filing and sanding down all the sharp edges generated by the jigsaw. Also, this piece of plywood isn't exactly great. It has lots of jagged edges and splinters and whatnot. So this tabletop does need a bit of sanding. This is the base for the saw. It's put together from the bit of ply that was cut out for the top and 2x4s to attach it to the bench. Now I'm installing the saw stand. I cut out about 5 minutes of me fighting with the bench as I had to sand off a bit of material to make it fit within the bracing. I'm going to be using my car jack to lift the bench up to find the right level to fix the base to. This did take a while, lots of finicking around to find the right spot. At around this time, I realized I needed to lift the base up higher than my stand could handle, so I added more cutoffs between the jack and the base. Here, I'm bringing the table sign to start finding the final level. I hadn't noticed yet that the saw's cord is between it and the base. When I measured the opening, I didn't take into account the little pegs that hold the saw's push stick, so I needed to take them out. Finally noticed the cord. I decided to measure how large the gap was. I only have about 8 millimeters to deal with there. And that's basically it for now. I will be upgrading the bench to include my miter saw and a router as well, but that's further down the line. The next step is to build a saw fence to replace the saw's little fence. So this is the end of the video. I'm just going to show you guys what the thing looks like. All right, so it took a while to build. I mean, a couple hours here and there every few days. Started maybe about a month and a half ago. So the idea here is I want to get my table saw out into the bench, into the garage, so that I could use it whenever I need to. Having everything stuck away in storage was a bit of a pain. Now it's out here and I can just sort of plug it in when I need to. I'll probably end up putting a power bar here so that I just plug in the power bar and all the tools here will work. So this is phase one. Essentially what I'm going to be doing here is I'm probably going to install a router somewhere around here, like a pop-up router. Back there I'm thinking about putting my miter saw in, so I'll actually sink it down a bit so that the tabletop lines up with this. Back here in this opening, sort of behind this here, I'll be putting a small shop vac for dust cleanup. You know, when cutting, you saw the amount of dust that came out just of the jigsaw earlier, so that's something I do want to get rid of. This thing's on wheels. So this thing moves pretty well. Here, let me just unlock them all. Yeah, so that's that. It moves. It's wide enough that it can fit through my fence door to go to the backyard, because it's nice and shady in the summer in the backyard, so I want to be able to move this thing around. It's 900 millimeters deep, 1800 millimeters wide. Will eventually fit back there when I remove the old cabinet, so that I can wheel it in, pop everything away, have all my big tools sort of available whenever I need to. And that's pretty much it. Next steps in this phase is to build a new fence. So right now I put a gap so that the current fence for the saw will fit, but I mean, I'd like to be able to use a larger space here, so I'll be building a fence that'll just join up to the front here and just cover everything up. All I need to do is make sure that it's square to the saw, to the blade, so I'm going to take a little bit of time and do that properly. So for now, and it's, you know, April, so I'm not going to be sawing much outdoors right now. Anyway, that's that.